Hi.
My video stopped. I'm not sure if I'm not able to restart it.
Okay. Try now. We're ready to go.
Yes.
My video's gone too. I don't know if you can see me or not.
Hold on. There you are.
Okay, is everybody
Yep.
ready?
Yes.
And are you going to let us know when everybody is in the room?
Cheryl, you're good to go if you can hear me.
I'm good. Hi, everybody. I am Cheryl Jacobs, Executive Vice President of Aia Miami. And I want to welcome you to our second town hall. We plan to be doing these every Wednesday at noon with different topics that will interest you, we hope. And please survey, respond to us with ideas so we know what you're looking for. I remember to use your chat, ask any questions, and we'll be fielding them at the end. We'll try and leave enough time to get to as many as possible. And before I introduce our esteemed, I'd like to bring up our Aia Miami President for 2020, Guri. Daphne is the co-founding president of Guri Matute. And with that, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm really honored and excited to be AIA Miami's president this year. Under these circumstances, it's a pretty big challenge to be able to serve, but we found a way, and that's the point. We are holding these town hall meetings. This is our second one, and we're going to continue to hold town hall meetings that bring relevant information to our membership as long as we need to, until it's safe to reopen and hold our normal activities, which I do plan on having as soon as it's safe to do so. So before we get started with the program, I just want to bring to your attention some of the things that AI is doing to continuously defend our profession. So in case you haven't never participated in as a member, you are able to, and I highly recommend that you do, attend Legislative Day every January. We go up to Tallahassee, we meet with our representatives and senators, and we talk about the issues. We work closely with AI Florida, and I'm proud to say that AI Florida was able to have very effective lobbying with your representatives and was able to defend the Consultants Competitive Negotiations Act, which is needed to enable to hire architects based on qualifications instead of price. So that was a huge win. We're also very proud to announce the protection of our license as it relates to any deregulation efforts that have been ongoing, as well as making sure that large firms and small firms are represented equally as it relates to the ability to have continuing service contracts with different municipalities by making sure that small firms are represented and controlling the maximum threshold to a $4 million contract. So I don't want to expand too much longer. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're going to continue to have some great programming. I think next week we have leaders from different building departments. We have Ace Marrero from the city of Miami, and we'll have other representatives talking about how to mitigate the plans process during this COVID-19 period as building departments are closed and how inspections are going to be handled on ongoing construction projects. Some other topics that we're going to be dealing with is what architects can do and during this COVID-19 period to be able to help medical professionals. So that's going to be another exciting topic. And of course, what we're going to be able to do to move our profession forward and move projects forward as well, how we're all planning on reopening our businesses, how we're going to work with the employees, etc. So we're here to help you, and I'm here to let you know that we also will have some free webinars and for continuing education. Just as a reminder that at the end of this year, we have to have 24 of the health, safety, and welfare credits by the end of this year. So look forward to that information coming out. Please, if you haven't already joined us on social media, we're on Instagram, we have a Facebook page and LinkedIn, and we also have weekly emails go out, and we have an email dedicated just to COVID-19 that comes out on Mondays. We have another weekly email that goes out regarding MCAT events, which are fun events, as well as every Friday we have the Friday Facts, which includes opportunities that you can apply to. It's a shared free information for our members. And did I miss anything, Cheryl, on the?
I think that's pretty good. And if you have any questions, just email me, Cheryl, CHERYL @aiamiami.org.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Daphne. I'm going to take just a minute for a quick introduction of our panelists in no particular order, but ladies first. Elizabeth Manso, CPA and president of Brigade Bookkeeping. Elizabeth, sorry, was having trouble reading because I've got 3 computer screens going. Sorry about that. While working at a large regional CPA firm for years, Elizabeth discovered that small business owners needed a reputable and trustworthy professional bookkeeping accounting firm to help day-to-day accounting, cash flow strategy, and management functions, and that's where Brigade comes to play. Next is Hernandez. Sara is with, oh my gosh, Sara, I'm having a senior moment. I started to say your old bank name. Sara is the results-oriented, civic-minded executive, 20 years of proven experience in commercial and residential lending in the South Florida community. Responsibilities have included portfolio development and management for a variety of banks and lending institutions, as well as civic and community leadership role. Sara is with First Citizens Bank, and she's also the president of the Miami Center for Architecture and Design Board. And then finally, last but not least, Porpoise Evans, a partner with PBY&A, a firm in Coral Gables. He focuses his practice on the representation of management and employment matters. So with that, I am going to go right to some questions. And let's start with Porpoise. Sorry, there we go. Porpoise, what issues should employers be thinking about in this new Uber remote work environment?
Well, I think the first thing that employers really need to keep in mind is that when employees are working from home, it's not that they're home from work. And that's the tendency, is to get very relaxed, very casual. So I'm sure there are tons of consultants who are busy telling you how to be productive at work and how to be professional, how to get up in the morning and treat it like normal. And from an employer standpoint, you kind of have to look at it through that same lens. You still have your same duties regarding discrimination issues, and you still have your same duties to pay people for all the hours that they're working. You have to be really tuned into the new legislation that's coming out regarding paid leave. And there's some new layers of responsibility that employers have, depending on whether your employees can work. So it's really the same stuff you needed to think about when people were coming into the office, but making accommodations for disabilities when they're working from home, recognizing that a home office is now as much your responsibility as the physical office, back at the branch.
Thanks. I'm going to do a quick follow-up with that. And do employers need employees to agree to a telecommuting policy or work from home policy?
No, the short answer is no. You don't have to have an agreement or a formal policy in place, but I absolutely recommend it. The looser your policies and procedures are, the more grounds, the more availability there is for an employee to feel that you're doing something wrong. So you should really outline the responsibilities and expectations in a written policy, and it's something I've been helping with people with a lot the last couple of weeks.
Great. I'm going to go over to Elizabeth to talk about money for a minute. Elizabeth, what can small businesses do right now to preserve cash reserves?
Honestly, it's really about contacting vendors. I'm not sure. Okay, so what we're doing with our clients is actually coming up with a strategy to contact any and all vendors that they have to try and preserve their money, because the thought process is once the money is gone, it's not coming back. So we have to be very prudent about whatever reserves or whatever money we're getting in the door and make wise decisions. So that's what I've been doing with my own firm, and that's what I advocate for every one of my clients, is to cut deep in their costs so that they can continue to pay their employees, as we know that employees are just such a big asset to us. So for me, it's definitely cost cutting.
Thanks. And I just want to tell everybody that Elizabeth is not calling in from Hawaii or from the beach here. She's got a video background, although it makes us wish we were all at the beach, I'm sure. Sara,
Yes.
how much of, everybody's talking so much about these loans, the new CARES Act and the government loans. And one of the biggest questions that people are talking about, I think, is how much of any of these loans will be forgiven, and how will that work?
So what needs to happen is, as long as the money that's given is used, 75% of it is used towards payroll, then that's forgiven. The 25% can be used towards rent, utilities, those types of things that have to do with keeping the doors open. But the main thing, the underlying reason for this is to keep people in their jobs. And so if you keep on that intention, then you'll be fine as long as you use the money for payroll and those other things. But the main thing is the payroll.
Payroll. And so the loan forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease your full head count, correct?
Correct. So what will happen is, so if prior to February 15th, you had XYZ employees, and after you got rid of them and you didn't rehire them, then your loan forgiveness portion will be accommodated based on the reduction of employees.
Great. It's really hard to weed through all of that documentation and figure out these things for sure. Porpoise, can an employer fire employees who are working remotely during the crisis?
As long as it's for an appropriate purpose, sure. You know, and I would just add on to what Sara was saying, and your comment about how confusing it is the regulators are coming out with new rules and regulations weekly, sometimes daily. So it's a really shifting landscape where they're usually refining and sometimes changing the notices that all the different professions are putting out. So it's really important to double check when you get some advice that what you're getting is current, because some of the things I was telling people 3 weeks ago when the first bills were passed got changed when the IRS came out with its rules and the DOL came out with its regulations. So
Because they don't talk to each other.
Can you fire? Yes, you can still fire. I had to walk a client through 2 different clients through terminations this week. Yeah, so yes.
So along those lines about doing all these things remotely, can remote workers file workers' comp claims? So what if somebody's working remotely and they have a fall or they hurt themselves in some way at home?
Yes, workers' comp claims are a little bit more complicated, and like I was saying before, it's an extra layer of burden for employers. But generally speaking, you still have the same rights when you're working from home. The question is whether the injury arises out of what you're doing at the time of the injury and in the course of your employment. So let's say you've turned your den into a home office. Well, that home office is the employer's responsibility now too. So it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that the rollerblades and Tinker toys are picked up because you could get a workers' comp claim for somebody who gets up to do something and twists an ankle. On the other hand, somebody's out playing in the backyard during a break with their kids, and they step in a hole. That would not be compensable under workers' comp, probably.
You said probably.
You've always got the wily plaintiff's attorneys who will make creative arguments, and they keep.
So, Elizabeth, one of the big things that small businesses are thinking about now is how do we safeguard our business's survival? And do you have some tips for that?
You know, I do. And I think more and more small business owners are, especially as the time goes on. I remember 4 weeks ago to date, I had to pivot my business to be relevant to today's new world, so to speak. And so instead of being like a typical bookkeeping CPA firm looking back, I actually do now like real-time accounting to help with cash flow management and projections. I'm no longer the old bookkeeping firm. So it's really, I know there's architects here. That's all there is. So it's kind of digging deep in how can your business stay alive based on today's new normal. At least get some ideas rolling around. That's important, I think. Also going back so pivoting and also going back to the idea of cost cutting and preserving cash. For example, I want to give you an example. I'm landlords. We were able to, negotiate with our landlord, believe it or not, during these times. Monthly subscriptions you may have that you didn't think of. For example, I'm not sure what, if there's if you pay some monthly subscriptions for your architectural software, calling them up and negotiating a price or getting, a little bit of a downgrade for now. I mean, there's so many things that in a survival mode, we kind of have to not be shy and reach out and really think outside the box. So it's really a time of thinking outside the box and making some bold moves and see what happens. I mean, really, under the rules, under our licenses, because we're all licensed here, see what we could do to kind of make us stand out and be relevant and stay alive, pretty much. So, we're hoping that by doing that, instead of our curve going way down and then having to fight our way back up, we want to kind of reduce that downward and just kind of have a little bit of a slope up, because there's going to be a ramp up time. So we have to consider that ramp up time and not just kind of wait and see what happens. We got to do something.
That's true. Sara, so in terms of the loan that many will be applying for and staffing, how does keeping your level of payroll fit in, and what if you end up rehiring in terms of how the loan works?
So basically you have until June 30th to rehire, because what they're going to look at is a snapshot of up until June 30th. So you have until that time to do that. But I wanted to kind of tail into something that Purpose said regarding the constant changes in what's going on. There's just something that happened over the weekend that we didn't get to discuss on the questions, and I want to bring it up. So the SBA, what they did is they put a ruling so that if you are a self-employed person, if you consider yourself a sole proprietor, but prior to this Sunday, you could apply for this loan and just give a P&L for the year. For 2019, show your P&L, and that they would take that number as your payroll. Now, because of the new ruling, they want you to file Schedule C from the tax return and submit that. Even if your tax return hasn't been filed, because the extension is until July, the SBA wants sole proprietors to fill out the form, the Schedule C. You can ask Elizabeth about that. She knows all about it. And and use that to calculate the income for 2019. And again, this was something that just happened over the weekend. So everybody who applied prior that hasn't been put through the system and submitted that documentation has to go back and get it redone. So there, changes.
Constant changes, and I'm sure it's going to take a long time for everything to be ironed out, that's for sure. So Porpoise, what exactly is the FFCRA?
FFCRA, well, in my world, like yours too, we have a lot of acronyms, and that's the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. And there are two prongs to it that employers really need to be aware of, and that is that whereas it applies to any employer with 500 or fewer employees. Then you get some exemptions if you've got 50 or less employees, but those are parenthetical. Basically, though, those two prongs require you to provide sick pay even if you didn't have to, even if it's not one of your normal policies, you have to provide 2 weeks worth of sick pay, and you need to be providing an additional 10 weeks of Family and Medical Leave Act. Whereas in the past, if you had less than 50 employees, you didn't even think about FMLA pay, and it was unpaid. Normal FMLA is unpaid. Now you have to pay employees for FMLA leave. Now it's only 66%, and mostly the additional 10 weeks after those first two is limited to folks who are off work because they have to take care of kids who are out of school, or childcare where the childcare facility has closed. But there are for the emergency sick pay that you have to pay at 100%, there's 6 different categories that you have to consider. So those are considerations that you have to have in mind, in addition to whether you have a justification for laying people off or furloughing them. Is it might just be that they're sick or qualify as sick under this new act, and then you're essentially having to pay sick pay that you never had to pay before.
So does that mean that we should all have an attorney, a CPA, and a banker working together on these applications and giving us the rules that it's such a complex issue that just applying is not going to do it?
You should really have a team of professionals working with you, you know, whoever they are. I mean, I represent 2 different architectural firms, and I got to tell you, the questions that you have are similar to the questions that my retail clients or my law firm clients have. You know, anybody who has employees has a lot of new burdens, but you know, we're talking about the loans too, and there is relief you can get, but there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of ways that you can be excluded from the relief. So you got to have the right people helping you out.
So along those lines with the relief, Sara, how, if someone gets this loan, how do they request loan forgiveness?
So what they need to do is go to the servicer of the loan, whoever is handling the loan for them, and they request the forgiveness from the servicer. Again, a disclaimer, a lot of changes will happen from here to the time that forgiveness comes in. But for right now, what we've been told is you go to the servicer, you request your forgiveness. They're going to ask you for specific documentation. And then the servicer, which would be the lender, has 60 days to respond to you. And then I imagine by that time, everybody will have exactly what the SBA is going to require in order to have the loans forgiven.
So let's assume that I end up having to pay back. What is the interest rate? And then if there's payments that are deferred, when does the interest calculation or accrue begin?
So the loan works like this. It's for 24 months. The first 6 months, the payments are deferred, but the interest continues to occur. Then you're paying 1% interest for the amount, but the amortization is based on 24 months of any portion that is not forgiven. So that can make the payment a little bit high. So you really want to make sure that if you take this money, that you can work whatever you need to do to make sure that it's forgiven and that you follow the instructions to do that. Did I answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. So Elizabeth, what are some of the new employer tax credits?
Right. Actually, before we go to that, I do want to
Sure.
mention something about working with the team of professionals. So, and it's really important if you are going to be submitting these PPP applications to work with either close to your banker or your accountant or your bookkeeper, only because I've assisted so many of my clients that if it wasn't for me reviewing their application, it would have been way off. So I can only imagine what Sarah's receiving on her end. So I highly suggest you reviewing before you submit to, a banker like Sara, your application, because it makes a world of difference. And it won't delay your approval process, because that's the big thing is, yeah, you want to get funding, yeah, but if you make mistakes, then the approval process is delayed. So you don't want that.
Absolutely.
Yes, and there are a couple of new credits out there, as Porpoise was saying, with these family acts. And I'm going to read it just so I don't get it, because they are so new. There is the sick and family leave credit, and it basically says that it covers employees who are unable to work because of the quarantine or self-quarantine. And these are all tax credits that are available to the employers. Since they're the ones paying, they're going to receive a tax credit. Also, they'll receive a credit for someone with the coronavirus, and also child care due to the daycare or school closures. They'll also have a credit there. Now, the credits are different. Also, there's the employee retention credit. So to to Porpoise's point, it's very important to try to keep on at least your superstar players. Actually, some employers are taking advantage of this and cutting out their non-superstar players. So retain your superstar players, and you will get a credit as well as an employer. Now, be mindful. So if you apply for the credit, so you can't have both the PPP loan forgiveness and those tax credits available. So that is something that you have to be mindful of, because yes, there are credits out there, but those are to be used if you don't have the PPP loan or forgiveness piece of it. So there's a lot of new things out there. I feel there'll also be more credits popping up as the time goes by this year. But so far that's where we're
So
at.
you can have the loan and the tax credits. You just can't apply for forgiveness on the loan.
Right, correct. But if your loan is forgiven, you cannot take the tax credit. You cannot double dip.
Right.
Let me just jump in off that too, because the tax credits, a lot of folks assumed that they were going to be automatic if you were paying people who were out. IRS has issued its regulations, and there's some very specific documentation that you have to put together when you allow somebody to take advantage of this paid leave now. So don't just assume that it's gonna that you're gonna get those tax credits and refunds if you haven't put your ducks in a row with the documentation from the employee, and that includes medical documentation sometimes.
Correct. And I think also that's key, Porpoise, to also announce to everyone, documentation is going to be key, and Sarah's going to acknowledge that for the forgiveness piece of this program.
Right, and a little something else on that. One of the things that would be really helpful for everybody is, if you are going to get this loan, set up a new account that is all the money that goes into that account has to do with that loan, and everything that goes out has to do with exactly what you're going to be forgiven on. It makes it easier to track, and that way you have a specific account that is only for the PPP money. Right.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. Porpoise, can furloughed employees collect unemployment compensation? You hear all the time that a lot of companies are furloughing versus laying off.
Yeah, generally, furloughed employees can get their workers' comp as long as they're not getting paid anything. And one of the benefits of having a furloughed employee is you really are showing the good faith that you're going to bring them back when you can, but also you're paying them benefits. Usually, you're not required to, but usually a furloughed employee still gets their health care paid for. So just make sure you're not paying them directly, but you're still paying the
Company
through the administrator. But yes, then they can apply, but employer has no control over the unemployment benefits. It's all through the state.
Well, speaking about employers and employees, so there's so many issues that come up. A lot of architecture firms have employees that are already working from home or working from remote locations anyway, but now it's everybody. So how does an employer know that the employee is putting in a full day's work? And does the employer have to pay overtime to a remote worker?
This might be the most important question you asked. And it's kind of a double-edged or a double-sided coin because you want to get, you don't want your work from home employees to be taking advantage of the fact that you can't watch them. So you should, this goes into the policy that we were talking about recommending before. You should have a clear set of guidelines of what the work day is, when breaks are. A lot of employers or managers like to have a morning meeting every morning to make sure everybody is at their desk at the designated hour. And it's better for the employees too to have a regimented schedule. So what there's only so much you can do, but checking in and having a fairly normalized workday is really important. And in terms of the overtime question, and this is something that I deal with all sorts of employers, but especially smaller professional firms, you really need to make sure you've done a classification audit and that you're not considering every salaried employee to be exempt from overtime. This is really important right now when people might be working odd hours. Any non-exempt employee is still entitled to get paid time and a half for any hour they work over 40 hours. So if they're not on an hourly, but they're on a weekly or monthly salary, but they're not exempt, then you still really need to have them tracking their hours, and you need to not be calling them at 2 in the morning or emailing or texting them at 2 in the morning, because every time they answer one of those emails or texts, they are back on the clock. And you could find yourself in trouble down the road, because we're going to see a lot of litigation as people get laid off.
So along those lines, are employers allowed to track employees' online activity when they're home? And what about, if they're on their home computer or even on their work, if they've brought their work computer home?
Well, the last question is the easy one. If it's the work computer that they brought home, then they have no rights. And it's better to have that spelled out in a policy, again, so that there's no question about the fact that you own your equipment and you can track any activity that's going on it. You can track what websites are visited, what keystrokes are executed by the employee, depending on what software you have. But what I like to tell folks is, just because you have the right doesn't mean you always want to exercise it. And transparency is really important, not only for morale, but also so that you have backup to make sure your employee knew what you were tracking. You really don't want to be sneak attacking. Now, if it's the employee's computer, it gets a little bit trickier. And then you do need to give the notice, and you need to have the consent, and basically giving notice of what you're doing if you've installed tracking software on their computer is important. But by getting the notice and continuing to use their own computer, rather than saying, well, you got to give me a work computer in that case, they are consenting to it once they've got the notice. So a little bit of an extra layer if they're using their own laptop. But yes, you still can maintain some control over what they're doing, what websites they're visiting, whether they're working, because it's twofold. It's not just keeping them off of the porn sites, or the gambling sites. We know that's what or the shopping, but it's also make sure they're working when they say they're working. Just being in front of the computer is not necessarily working.
Thanks. So so that we have some time to answer some of the questions from our listeners, I'm going to go to that. And then before we close, I'll ask each of you for some closing thoughts. So I can't access those chats again, Colleen. I didn't see too many come through, but Colleen, could you read one for us and say who it's from? Did we lose Colleen? No, there she is.
I'm having a look at it and I do not see, let's see, hold on.
I saw one that came from Aida Curtis, I think.
Yeah, I can't view them right now. Sorry, give me just a second.
All right, so why don't you look for that, and then
thank you.
I will go back to some closing words. Sara, do you have some closing advice?
So the question I get all the time is, are you processing the PPP loans, right? And so what's happening is, as much as we want to help everybody, there's such a volume and a bottleneck in trying to get these loans through that the best thing to do is to go to the bank that you bank with, that you have a relationship with, and apply for the loan through them. And And that's your best avenue to get the loan. I'm also answering a question that was sent to me through chat. So that's, and the other thing, I apologize that I did not wear my, I know there's more than 10 people in this room, but thank you for without.
Well, a minute ago, my cat joined the program. So Elizabeth, well, first let me ask Colleen, do you have any chat questions?
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing them right now. I don't see any questions right now.
Okay.
I don't have any.
Elizabeth, you want to give us some closing words of advice?
Sure. So some of us have some downtime right now, and it would be a great idea to capitalize on that downtime, working maybe on internal processes and systems, so that way, you know, your business is more streamlined on the way back up when this, you know, when we're heading to the other side of this curve, and we're all back to our new normal. Also, it'd be a great idea to work on your website. Work on your website, get everything on point. If you have, you know, social media out there, I'd say redirect it to something more relevant if possible. Again, I really think it's time to think out of the box. And, you know, both accountants and architects are very structured people, and it's kind of hard for us, but when push comes to shove, we can be quite creative in this aspect. So that's it. Let's get through all this together.
Great. Thank you very much. And Porpoise?
I guess as an attorney, I do a lot of fighting in court, but just as much advising and counseling. And I've been wearing my counselor hat a lot lately. And two types of clients are really jumping out to me. One are the clients who are afraid to do anything. And I have to remind them that you still have rights as an employer. You still have all the rights you had a month ago. To terminate people who are poor performers or misbehaviors. So, you know, it's good when you work with counsel and make sure you're not stepping out of bounds, but you shouldn't be afraid to take those types of actions when necessary. The other is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, and those are the employers who are so fearful that they're going to lose their companies that they're taking drastic steps. And not really thinking about the impact not only on their employees but on the business in general if they're cutting too quickly. And I've had to urge a few folks to not do the massive layoffs that they thought they needed to do out of fear, but to be measured and to recognize that there is some help available. And it might take a little bit of time to get it, and there's a lot of belt tightening that you need to do, but you don't need to go right from 0 to 11 overnight.
Cheryl, the chats are now showing up. Do you want me to read some of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was an early one that I saw from Aida Curtis. So I just don't want to miss hers.
Okay, that one I don't have. I apologize. I have one from Ben Pennington. To everyone. As an independent contractor without a payroll, you mentioned supplying the Schedule C for 2019. Is someone eligible that has taken a discount to their rate but still working? How does the 75% towards payroll apply towards loan forgiveness?
So I don't understand the piece where he says, is someone eligible that has taken a discount to their rate but is still working? I don't understand.
Maybe a salary reduction.
Okay.
Or it's an independent contractor, so it's probably somebody who is, you know, all of a sudden charging $100 an hour instead of $170 an hour in order to keep, keep the business.
Well, the 75% towards the payroll, in his case, there is no payroll. It's just what the 1099 is being paid if he's an independent contractor. 75% of whatever that amount is that is considered 1099 income would be used. The fact that there was a reduction, it doesn't matter. It is the sum of the amount, and they're letting you go up to first quarter 2020. So the sum of all of that.
Colleen, you want to read
Yes.
another one?
Daphne asked us to ask Porpoise, please explain how to transition people back to the office. Should we require or make it voluntary to return to the office?
I guess that begs the question, when are you talking about? Are you talking about when we have the all clear? Okay, Daphne nods yes. I think that there's no blanket answer, you know, like we like to say, it depends. It depends on how necessary it is for folks to get back immediately. Who is going to be much more productive and, to use the term of the day, essential in the office as opposed to working from home. I think that, as Elizabeth said, we need to evolve and become more flexible and recognize that what we thought was essential a month ago might not be true anymore. You know, I'm recognizing a lot of different types of productivities and efficiencies that I didn't think I had and that I didn't think my assistants had. But some people, I just know they're not doing what I need them to do when they're not there. So assuming that the all clear is a real all clear and it's not premature, then I think you want to get back to whatever your new normal is going to be as quickly as possible. Now, that new normal might be allowing more work for home because you realize that it's something people want, and you get just as much out of it as having them in the office. But if that's not the case, then get them back in. And there's no reason to delay it because work from home, I'm sitting in my bedroom right now, but it is supposed to be an extension of my office. I'm logged into the work computer the same way I would be logged in, 2 miles from here. So the transition, there's no requirement for the transition to take longer than overnight. Do it over the weekend, like you were moving offices. I mean, really, like if you were moving from Brickell to Coral Gables, you would do that over the weekend. It wouldn't have to be a 6-week process.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Colleen, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, from Leslie Saul. Is the PPP money only for the 8 weeks after the loan is closed, or can it be used retroactively?
I'll answer that. It's supposed to be used for the 8 weeks from the time the loan was closed, and it needs to be used prior to the June 30th date.
Great. Were there any more, Colleen?
Sure, yes.
We have time for one more.
From Aida Albaisa.
Albiza.
Are the costs associated with the CPA and legal consulting, etc., associated with the PPP loan considered forgivable under the loan?
So I did answer this in the chat. No, they're not considered forgivable under the PPP.
Great. So with that, I were two things. One, in a minute, I'm going to turn it back over to Daphne to close because, I have one. I think we have one more question that popped up. We'll do that. Hang on a second. Colleen?
Yes. Can you use the PPP money for paying rent for future months or only during the 8 weeks?
Only during the 8-week covered period.
Great. Well, that was an easy answer. So let me, in a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Daphne, but I just wanted to thank the panelists, Sara, Porpoise, and Elizabeth. It's great to have access to you in this short meeting. I'm going to ask you, if we get any more questions, to help us answer them, and tell everybody to remember to connect with these people directly. Feel free to do that. And then I'm going to turn over to Daphne.
Well, I'm going to bounce it right back to actually, how should everyone that's on this call reach out to Sara, Porpoise, and Elizabeth Manso? How do you guys want to be reached? website, phone? How do you want to be contacted?
Daphne, for me, I'm happy with email.
Okay. Okay. Porpoise?
Emails are best for me. I mean, I'm not a big social media person. I am on LinkedIn, and sometimes people reach out to me, and it takes a few days. But email, and then once we have a relationship, I can be responsive on cell phone, text, WhatsApp. Email's the best entry point.
Email's the best for you too. Sara?
The same here. Email's the best.
Okay.
Great. And we'll be sending out for those that signed up with the answer to some additional questions and contact information.
Well, as president of AIA Miami Southward Chapter, I am so impressed with our panel today. Thank you so much for everyone that took time from their day to participate in this call. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it valuable. And if you like it, please respond to our survey so we know what your thoughts are, and join us for the coming weeks. Cheryl?
Thanks, everybody. And I promise that by our next one next week, I'll have a better background. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.